Be serious.
Okay, we are doing the Article Review 2 on equitable education of English learners in the Common Core age, implications for principal leadership by David Whitenick. This article discusses the importance of the student population in the United States and how many of the students are not proficient in English, and how instructional leaders don't quite have the skills that they need to help these students perform as they should. So this article discusses a couple of ways to facilitate reculturing using one model called the SIOP model, which is the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol model. And they also talked about using professional development as well as that model, just pretty much combining the two to see if it will increase student achievement. They talked about how the SIOP model has been used in years, let's say at least 15 years ago, at least when this was published, it was 15 years or so ago, and how although that model does reach a lot of students, if the author felt like when it's combined with professional development, it will help the students, will increase their performance in dealing with Common Core. So that's pretty much a quick summary of it. What did y'all think of it so far? This article, for one, let me go back. I chose this article because where I am working, our population is becoming more diverse, and we only have one part-time ELL teacher, and he's just not really reaching all of our students at all, but nothing has been done about it. So we have students who are coming up to the upper grades and they're taking these end-of-grade tests, and they are not performing as they should because of the comprehension due to the barriers with their language. Have you seen anything similar to this or heard of anything similar to this?
Yeah, I think that this is a great article, and it's also really relevant at our school. We have a significant population of students who are not English native speakers. They're Spanish or they're Hmong. And we have kind of found that the requirements are so low for them to test out of like ESL services. It's really easy for them to test out, but they're not proficient to be successful, like you're saying, on the state exams and things like that. And our school, I work at an early college. We are absolutely not designed, and we don't have the structures in place for these kids. And so this is something we discuss a lot about. We're doing them a disservice because they have tested out of ESL, and there's no one in our building who can help these kids that's specialized in helping them anyway. And we have one elementary teacher who comes over in the afternoons twice a week to help the ESL students, only because there's one student who is identified. So she's only supposed to really help that one kid, but she helps 5 or 6. I think that this is a great thing that we really need to be talking about.
Yeah, that's true. I noticed that what we have here in Guilford County is a school that is pretty much devoted to, it's just a whole school. I know it starts at elementary, and once they are, I guess they place out of it, they'll put them in their home schools. But while they're there, they're fine because that's where all the interpreters are, the ESL teachers and all of that. But once they place them into another school, some of them still do not perform as expected.
Yeah, and
I know that. Go ahead, Stacey. I was just going to say, we just have an ESL assistant, not like an ESL teacher. And our school is K-8, and we only have about 40, maybe 40 ESL students. But you know how they were talking about in the article about doing professional development. We are required to do professional development on ESL study kind of thing every year. So every year we have to do something with ESL, and that kind of helps with trying for the general ed teachers and special ed teachers helping those ESL students.
I work in Henderson County, which has a high population of migrant workers. It's got a fairly high population of English language learners. And the last few years, they've started doing in elementary school the bilingual classes where they teach in both English and Spanish for all kids to kind of get them more immersed in that culture. The school I worked in last year had a 30% Hispanic. That doesn't mean they're ELL, but he said a lot of them have tested out of that that classification. That they, like I said, they for 30% of the population only have two adults that spoke Spanish in the entire school. Was pretty. They were pretty. I guess they underappreciated or under, what do you call it, for the number of students they were trying to meet the needs of.
And I do know that based on this article that the model is research based. Although this is my first time hearing of it, it was through this article. It is research based. I'm just surprised that it has not been pretty much something that's been implemented statewide, you know, to go along with Common Core, especially with the way that the state's student populations are changing. I know they're talking about the biggest states like California, for example, but even in the state of North Carolina, I have just watched even enrollment at our school, I have watched a shift in the numbers of those in which English is not their native language. And we don't have any professional development on it. We have diversity training, but it really does not cover language barriers and their academic performance. It just covers, you know, be sensitive to their needs and things of that nature.
And you would think being a kind of a farming kind of country or state, especially in eastern North Carolina, a lot of farmland, you would think that they would, you know, have something like this in place for our state and for our teachers to do in the schools, since, you know, we're getting all the Hispanics and other people in front to do work kind of thing. But you, like you said, Carla, you would think that they would actually have something in place for us to do, or, you know, for us to work on.
That's what I was thinking as I was reading the article, is like, there's nothing in place. Like I had, like Carla, I've never heard of the SIOP model until I read this article. And then when I was looking at the bottom of the article, the strategies and the recommendations and things, you know, like those are really great strategies, you know, to be using, and we could all probably really easily implement those and make some changes to how we do vocabulary. So I don't think it would be difficult to implement. I just wonder why it's not widespread.
Yeah, I wonder that too, because we're doing this initiative in our in our county for reading, and we're using this big $1 million whatever we got of this program called the ARC, which is the American Reading Company, that's pretty much wiped away everything that we have been taught. Even with guided reading, we don't even do any of that. That's not even part of the program that we're using now. But I was thinking, what would happen if we actually use that along with this model? I'm thinking that we would see a lot more growth than what we are getting now in the areas of literacy, and even, in other areas, because that literacy affects math, science, social studies, and anything else, all of the other content areas. So it is, that could be a question for that curriculum interview. Why is it that we don't have anything to help with the students who have language barriers, or what is something that we could do to help them? Because that, I'm sure, that will make a difference in achievement across the board. Going back to what you were saying, Allison, about the activities, I was looking, I think like the third page of the article where it has some listed activities, and you're right, those instructional activities, I'm pretty sure that we all seriously implement them without actually even knowing that they're part of that model. But I wonder why some principals have it, because I believe it says in here about how instructional leadership really are there at a standstill, I guess, on how to help those learners. And I'm trying to figure out, to me, some of the strategies seem really basic. For example, it says to choose a brief informational text that includes academic vocabulary as a platform for intensive academic vocabulary. That's something that we're doing. We're talking about that tier 1 language, tier 2, tier 3. So I found, I'm pretty sure, like I said, this is something that we all try to do.
And I think,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just saying that, your principal is supposed to be your educational leader of the school. And one of the big things they talked about was, them having the understanding at a high level understanding of how English learners acquire that language, how they're able to to understand the program itself. And if you look at principals across the board, most principals in our area, don't have any kind of language background. They don't have any kind of background that lends itself to helping these specific kinds of kids. And I think that's why I was talking about, putting it into a master's level class and being able to, know strategies to help these guys. And I mean, for me, when I speak to someone who doesn't understand English at all, it puts you at a very, very low comfort zone. And it's almost like, there's such a big barrier, it's hard to meet the needs of those kids. So, if you're supposed to be the leader of your school and curriculum, then it almost is kind of backwards, isn't it?
It is.
Well, and I like how this also, it brings DeFore back up too towards the end of the article. And, that's something that we have gone over time and time again in our grad school classes. It's like, what do you want the kids to learn? How do you know when they've learned it? And then how do you know when they experience difficulty? And so if you use this strategy, the SIOP model, it's got the recommendations and it tells you exactly what to do to answer all three of those questions. So I think that's a great strategy that principals could implement in their school very easily.
Yeah,
I agree. And I was getting ready to bring that point up, but then going back to what Matthew says, a lot of principals, they really aren't fully aware. My principal, she is driven by data, but as far as breaking it down to the very, I don't want to say bottom, but just getting down to defining every single component, I don't think that we really go there with that. We're just really focused on, I almost want to say the bubble kids. That's who we focus on when we get to testing and making sure that we have that expected growth and all that. And we don't think about, well, what can we do to help those other? Because to me, this is almost a simple fix.
Mm-hmm.
If we just use this and have some professional development, this could really make a difference. Something that we all could see, something that everyone could do. But I think on the other hand, maybe teachers, if we see that this is an issue, and if we reflect on what we're doing, this is something that teachers could probably take on as a leader and see about implementing themselves.
That's what I was just thinking. You know how I told you that we have to have professional development every year on ESL. It'd be interesting if we could kind of or teach that model to the other general ed teachers. Like if I were to do it, then that'd be part of our ESL professional development for that year. That's kind of what I was thinking about, getting it implemented. Because just I would have to do a whole lot more research, more research on the model, but it don't look like, it's too difficult. But
I was curious about, I don't know if we have a couple of Spanish immersion schools here, and I was curious about if this is a model that they use to those of us who are fluent in English, if this is the model that they use to help us learn Spanish. That's one of the things that came to mind when I was reading this. The other thing I was thinking about are what other assumptions do us or any instructional leaders have when we are thinking about our English learners? Do we think they're just not going to be able to get it? Or do they think that it's something that can be done at home to help them? Because I have students who their siblings is the one that I sometimes conference with because parents cannot speak any English at all. So they're pretty much sitting there as the interpreter. And of course, those, unfortunately, are my lowest performing students. So those are just some of the thoughts that came across as I was going through this article.
Well, those are some of your AMOs, the ELLs are. So, that's a pretty important group to target. But it's easy just to kind of, like you said, overlook them, knowing that they struggle and knowing what to target for them is kind of tough. And I think that's why, like administrators, they depend on other people to, make sure they're doing their job and incorporating all these strategies, no matter if it's PSYOP or whatever it is, for them to be able to get out of that kind of classroom and into a regular classroom or whatever and be successful there.
Mm-hmm. So just going back to what you were saying, what other steps could we use though? Because again, I hadn't heard of this at all. So as up and coming instructional leaders or administrators, what are some steps that we could use to help these English learners? Because of course we know about professional development, but what else could we do?
Well, I think staying current on like research-based strategies is, really important too, so that you can lead the professional development and that you can be knowledgeable and so that you can, make sure your staff and then really just hold them accountable. Like these strategies that we talked about or that are in the article, like we said, they're not hard and we're probably already doing them. So I think it would be really important to hold the staff accountable to make sure that they're doing those strategies and they're doing them to fidelity if you're going to spend the time and the money on professional development.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll be honest with you. You also have to think about how many kids there are that are in that kind of class. I mean, I was thinking, well, why wouldn't you just, like Stacey said, do a whole school staff development on there, a whole county staff development. The problem is, if I've got 5 kids who are ELL, is that a good use of resources to spend for everybody to take that training? So I think you want to make sure that as an administrator, you take the training and you've got the right people to take that training, but, to train to help kids in the way they need to be, whatever kind of training it is, professional development it is, but just knowing that how many, economic wise, is it feasible to do that?
So I guess it would be a site-based decision, though.
Right. I mean, that's my understanding, because if I worked in a county school, and then I'm still in the same county, but now it's a city school, and we have, I would say, less than 3%. So we went from 30% to 3% from the schools that I worked at. So there's a lot less emphasis on ELL learners, and even the teacher themselves does not speak Spanish very well and communicate very well. They struggle along with the teacher sometimes.
That's true. And I guess that was the purpose of our county doing all of this diversity training with us, was for that reason, because we did have a lot of teachers who struggle with it. But that diversity training happened 10 years ago, and a lot has happened within the past 10 years. So I feel like it probably should be site-based. But on the other side, I'm like, this should be something that is ongoing, because we know that the population of English learners are going to, Hello?
You're
Right
there.
there.
Yeah, you're there.
Something popped up. What was I saying? It's going to be the shift in the student population that's continued to change to become more diverse. So I do feel like it should, it's just both sides. It's hard for me to really weigh in on which would be the most beneficial.
I'll be honest with you. One of the big things our county is doing right now is, trying to get our name in a positive light out in the community, because we had about 200 students go to either charter schools or homeschooling. So can you imagine if the ELL opened up a charter school just towards them? I mean, that could take your entire population away, because they know they would know how to communicate. They would feel comfortable. I mean, that would be pretty horrible for like a county like ours.
Mm-hmm.
Although it is a good idea.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's really good for them, but it would be horrible for the counties, and they would be so upset because they would lose so much money.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's not think about that.
Yeah. But I'm looking back at those 3 questions, Allison, that you brought up before.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would like to have those posted somewhere in my classroom to ensure that I am reaching everyone at all times. Mm-hmm. Those are just, those are 3 critical questions that we should just ask ourselves all the time. Stacey, how much time do we have left?
We're good. It should pop up in the corner and say 10 minutes left when it gets 10 minutes. So you're good. You got at least 10 minutes.
Okay, just checking. Did you see like anything that in the article that was unclear? I personally had to go back and I had to really look up the SIOP model, because I really didn't know I didn't see a clear definition in the article. I had just, I assumed that it was good, but I had to actually go back and look up what it was.
I had to go back and read the article multiple times, just to be honest, because I thought it was kind of difficult, so that I could kind of make sure that I thoroughly understood the article before we came in and discussed it.
Mm-hmm.
They used a lot of data to, like, you know, what we were talking about earlier with California and using all those just to show how many English language learners they have in their school or in that state. But it was data driven article for sure. So I had to go back and look at the numbers to make sure, you know, multiple times.
Yeah, it was definitely data driven. Yeah.
Well, and then it would go in and be like, well, in North Carolina, they tried this and 12 teachers got this result, but like then that was all it would say.
Right.
And like it didn't go into a lot of detail.
Yeah, I noticed it's not, I know it's not a literature review, but it's something else that you call it. And it would literally give you one sentence, but I did want to know, well, what steps did they go to? I mean, here are the measurements, but what did they get? Where did they start to get those numbers? What did they do? They would say it's just some type of experiment or some type of design, and here are the results. So I sort of got confused with that too.
But, you know, they mentioned not every, but like California, Texas, Florida, New York, Illinois, and then Kansas, Mississippi, North Dakota. And then they bring up South Carolina. But I was wondering why they didn't include North Carolina. Like, you know, because we talked about it being a large, well, at least I thought there was a large number of ELL learners. But
yeah, that's true. And I am curious as to what else would go along, because it talks about professional development and SIOP, but what other types of professional development? Because that could be an array of things. Like I said, when we went back to the diversity training, or are we going to talk about cultures with it, or how socioeconomic status can affect English language learners? So where specifically are they talking about with professional development along with academics? Because I feel all of that would play a part in it as well. Their exposure to certain things within the community, and how that could help them with their language skills or their literacy skills or any content area skills. So I would have liked some more information or suggestions about professional development that would go along with the model.
Yeah. I know that at my wife's school, they've been doing what's called GLAD training. I don't know if you guys have had that before, but it's basically it concentrates on language acquisition in elementary school. But the whole idea of implementation, I think they're going to try to do it as an entire school. But those are the only things that I know of about, ELL.
Well, you know more than what I know, because I don't really know anything about it at all, except for I see this man come and get students. And for a few years, I didn't even know he was the ELL teacher. I'm just going to be honest. I had no idea who this man was, but I figured they let him into school once a week, so it's fine for him to take my students. So I didn't know who the man was, because he would just always say, I'm coming to test them. I didn't know what he was testing them on. Well, actually, no one did. He's never at any staff meetings or anything. He just shows up. And unfortunately, like I said, we don't see much growth in them at all. One of the friends, for example, is in 4th grade, and he can read fluently. He's a fluent reader, but when it comes down to comprehension, he's still performing on a 1st grade level because he doesn't know anything that he is reading. So I'm feeling like we are doing a disservice to this young man by having him come to school day after day. And it's like he's sitting in a whole nother world because he does not understand anything that we're saying to him. He can't read for information, so he's just reading because, hey, my teacher say I have to read during this time, so that is what I'm doing. And the other part, I'm sure y'all have heard me mention that we are a Montessori school. And with that comes, we receive all this extensive training, which is almost equivalent to a master's degree because it's an 18-month program to become a certified Montessori teacher.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And with all of that, you would think that we as teachers would know how to address that. And even in that, we don't. We talk about culture, but when it comes to that language piece, it's pretty much based on them knowing English. So again, that just made me think about what you were saying, Matthew, with how we're trying to market ourselves better because we don't have the best name for ourselves anymore either. We used to be the top Montessori school and had all these awards, and we haven't received anything in a long time, and we're no longer at the top. We're just another public school in the area. And, part of it is because we're not addressing the needs of the population anymore. So we too are losing a lot of students to charter schools, a whole lot just for that reason. And I'm just thinking, here's something that we could implement. Maybe that would help us,
Mm-hmm.
So my last question was related to, I got to find it in the article. It said in the article on page, I'm trying to find it. It had to do with how the principals were not, hold on, I'm looking for it. They were talking about the reculturing of instructional leadership and how, yes, here's my question. How much professional development do instructional leaders actually have on these topics? Because I know a lot of times with my principal, she comes back with information about, okay, this percentage is going to be on the ELGs and we need to implement this. We got this big program and you're going to drop everything you're doing and go take the training this summer and all that stuff. But how much professional development do they get on instruction, on those things to help their teachers?
How much do principals get?
Yes.
Well, they've got to get CEUs just like teachers do.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is up to the county. The county, like our county does, professional development for principals and assistant principals, and it's nothing that has related to literacy or anything like that. But I will say that they will go to teachers, like when they have big professional development days, and kind of go into the class and kind of look around and give them that nod, I understand what's going on, and then that's basically it. That's just from my experience.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I see too. I don't feel like oftentimes that principals stay abreast, like what you were saying, Allison, on current research. Is, I think sometimes, you sign up for something on email, then every now and then something will pop up and you're like, oh, here's something we should try. But I'm just wondering, does the state have mandates on how much professional development instructional leaders or school administration should partake in?
They do. It's like the CEUs. It has to be part of the literacy, just like teachers are.
Mm-hmm.
But do they have to do as much as, when you do your renewal cycle, do they have to do as much as teachers do now? Or is it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and see, like I know that again, I'm with the early college. We have North Carolina New Schools, or we used to have that. That organization doesn't exist anymore, but they used to provide significant professional development and stuff for the principals, especially. They called it like Principal Institute, and it was during the summer. It was like a week, almost. So it was pretty extensive, but that organization doesn't exist anymore, and so like I know my principal isn't getting that unless she's at the district getting it.
Right. Know that they have plenty of opportunities, but it all comes down to money and how are you going to spend it, and I think a lot of what most counties do is they'll figure out what's the things that's going to help us the most. And when they come to help you the most, I think ELL is pretty far down the ladder for that, and unless you have a very high percentage in your county. So it makes it tougher on those guys that are have less representation.
I was curious. Okay, I was curious going back to how they teach the using the model, teaching the academic vocabulary words. I'm just wondering, with using this message, this method, this model, does it benefit the students in one content area more so than another content area? I see how it could help in literacy. Well, I guess they could help and all, because if they're doing vocabulary across all of the content areas, I guess they would see significant improvements in math and science and the other areas. So I guess that would be the point. Y'all have any other questions or comments? I think I covered everything, what we liked about it, what some of the strengths of the article was, the weaknesses of not providing enough details with how they got the numbers with some of the experimental designs. Were there anything else y'all wanted to share? I enjoyed the article. It was informative once I looked up the information to explain what the model was.
I agree. I think it was a great article, and I'm glad that you picked it. I think it was really relevant, to things that we're going to face when we're in administrative positions.
Yep.
Especially with this Common Core that I don't think we'll ever get rid of. So, yeah, I think it was a good article to address those issues with English learners. All right, anything else? I'm good.
I'm good too.
That's good.